Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with internationally acclaimed guitarist, vocalist, composer, and producer Tony Davis. We dive into his new 2025 CD, Jessamine, and a life lived well in the jazz world. This new album references the name of the street he grew up on and stands as a symbolic return to that origin point, a musical homecoming of sorts. Not just a nostalgic return, though, but a full circle synthesis of experience, influence, and identity. He's originally from Hartford, Connecticut, and he has performed at prestigious venues like the Blue Note, the Village Vanguard, Smalls, Jazz at Lincoln Center, and Birdland, and also at major festivals. We cover quite a ride that he's had here in the jazz world. Enjoy this interview. Tony, it's great to meet you, man. How's life today?
Life is great. Life is great. You know, I really can't complain. I'm playing music with amazing people almost every day. So I can't think of a better way to be living.
Yeah, man, that sounds like the way, dude. So you're in New York. I'm in Kansas City, just for context.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to getting into the new album, and to pronounce it correctly, it's a street you grew up on, Jessamine. Is that how you say it?
It's you're very close. Jessamine.
Jessamine. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The internet foiled me again.
It's okay. That's a very, very common mistake.
So I'm looking forward to getting into the album, your life and music. So I want to begin our adventure before we get into the new work and your life by asking you this. 5 years ago, this pandemic was literally changing so many aspects of our lives, especially musicians. How did you get through that era, and how did it influence the way that you create and live today?
That's a great question, because that definitely was a pivotal moment for myself, and I think, you know, most artists and people. The pandemic was interesting because actually it marked the release of my first album, which I had recorded before knowing the pandemic was even going to happen. And, you know, having that come out it was like July of 2020. So it was really when things were all completely shut down. Was a very strange an eye-opening time, you know, to release this first body of work into this sort of new world. But as the pandemic sort of continued, again, I think I'm speaking more than just for myself in this way, but it provided this type of space and room for reflection to really reevaluate what music, what life, you know, means to me. What are my values? What do I really want to do? What are my priorities here? So I would say throughout those few years, my, I guess, trajectory or artistic path kind of veered a different direction for the best. And I think I just allowed myself to open up to a lot of different types of music and things that I had previously loved and never really did anything with. So I started getting back into songwriting and singing, which was something that was like what got me into music in the first place. And so naturally, just over the course of nurturing those things, I think the music I started writing reflected that change, and the people I started playing with, and so forth and so on. And so anyways, I would say the past two records, Cloud Nova, which was released last year, and then this most recent release, Jessamine, really reflect, I think, the culmination of some of that change that took place during that time.
So talk to me a little bit about this album. This seems like it's really kind of a hearkening back to growing up and getting into the music, and what does it mean? What does this album mean to you now that it's out?
Yeah, you know, I've been telling people it's sort of like a musical homecoming in more ways than one. For starters, the rhythm section on pretty much the entire album, which is Matt Dwanzik on bass and Jonathan Barber on drums, incredible musicians who are also from Hartford, Connecticut, where I'm from, and where this street, Jessamine, is in West Hartford. So, you know, I grew up basically learning how to play music from those guys. They're a little bit older than me, not much, but I always really looked up to them, you know, growing up in Hartford. So in that sense, it already felt like this sort of homecoming. And then just the songs themselves, the body of work, each piece kind of reflects different seeds that were planted, I think, early on in my upbringing. Both of my parents are musicians. So growing up in the house, there was always great records on, other brilliant artists coming through the house. That played a big role. So there's definitely an homage to that. Um, there's a piece by the great Brad Meldau that we arranged. He's also from Hartford. Um, we did an arrangement of the Beatles song "I Will." My mom used to sing that to me as a lullaby. So, anyways, each song kind of has like a little story behind it that traces back to those, that musical upbringing that I'm talking about.
So, what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I hope the listener finds, I guess it's generally speaking, some type of connection to themselves, or I guess whatever music has done for me, I hope I can kind of relay that on to the listeners who listen to my music. And music has done wonders for me. It provides an escape. It helps me connect to myself deeper and inspire. And so at the base level, I really hope that happens. And then, I think it's also just a sort of a chance to hear my musical blueprint at this point in time and to get to know me better and the artists that I'm working with. But yeah, it's mostly just meant to, as I said, do what music does for me. That's really at the best what I'm trying to do. To heal, to inspire, you know, um, to nurture, to help forget about some of the not so positive things going on in the world, stuff like this.
Yeah, and I think that's one part of what I'm talking to a lot of the musicians and creatives in the world today is that I think increasingly with things being as tenuous as they are politically and it's radiating out into our lives, how much of that is in your mind when you're making music and performing live? How much is that in the forefront?
Mm. Yeah, I would argue it's pretty much unavoidable, really. Music it really is just a reflection of everything going on in the psyche and the soul and the spirit, and therefore in the world. And that's mostly a good thing. But yeah, it can be hard for it to not feel daunting sometimes, just with some of the stuff going on. But as always, music has always served as just, one of the most powerful, ways to sort of counter that negativity, and to make light out of darkness, out of the not so great things that are happening. It offers that space of healing and of positivity. Um, that for me personally is kind of like my form of, I'm not necessarily a religious person, but that definitely is my area of prayer or, spiritual practice. And so yeah, it's more helpful and healing than ever, I would say, to just have this sort of world that you can tap into and connect with others. And it's such a music is such a place of truth, it always reflects the truth, which is something that is incredibly humbling. But probably the thing I appreciate the most about playing music is that no matter what, when someone is playing music, the truth is what's going to come out of them, whether they like it or not. And I think that's really important to remember.
So, how did a kid from Hartford pick up the guitar, become internationally known, make a career out of this love of music? How did all of this happen?
Mm. Well, that's a, nuance. There's a lot of factors. Undeniably, there's a huge influence. Again, both of my parents are jazz musicians, so I grew up hearing this music and just, whether even realizing it or not, being surrounded by some pretty amazing musicians. I think for the majority of my childhood and teenage years, I took that for granted, as a kid does. It was kind of just like, that's what my parents do. And oftentimes, of course, I always loved it and appreciated it, but I don't think I really understood the depth of what I was being surrounded by. So it wasn't until I was about 18 that I really kind of decided to get serious about music. So, I did really feel like I was playing a lot of catch up in a way. Um, but that being said, there's a vibrant scene in Hartford. There's a great legacy, especially in jazz. The great Jackie McLean really cultivated that scene back in the 60s and 70s. And my father played in his band. And so his legacy was a big part of my upbringing too. And so there's just a lot of these influences that I think nurtured me, again, whether I realized it or not. And then as I kept going, naturally just kept trying to surround myself with musicians who were a lot better than me and inspired me, such as Jonathan Barber and Matt Dwanzik. The guys on this record, they were definitely two guys who I looked at that way. And over time, I slowly started doing gigs in New York City. And then after I finished at the Hart School of Music, which is in Hartford, I just moved directly to New York City. Two guys said they needed a third guy for a roommate. And it was kind of just a spur of the moment decision. Totally was not ready at all, but just sort of took the plunge. And now it's kind of hard to believe, but that's over 8 years ago. And so it's just sort of one thing has led to the next. And it's amazing. Yeah, the way connections work and you never know who's going to be in the audience and all this type of stuff.
So, other than your parents, what was the first live show, jazz show that you saw that really made you think, I want to be up there one day?
Yeah, that's a great question because it ties to this album. So again, another big reason why I included that Brad Meldau piece is when I was 16, I had a friend who was a lot more into jazz at the time, but I had like a rock band in high school. I was first like all about Jimi Hendrix and the blues. And anyways, this guy in my rock band, he was also really into jazz. And so he took me to this Brad Meldau concert where Brad was playing with Joshua Redman duo. And, I had heard so many jazz concerts, of course, and they all moved me, but something about that one really struck me. And in retrospect, I think it's because of how, a lot of Brad's influences, the way he ties together rock and classical and jazz and a lot of the same artists that I love. It really resonated with me and sort of made me realize like, oh yeah, this can be jazz too, and that this is what I love. This is great, and it was just definitely a pivotal moment for me. Um, so yeah, I really remember that concert very fondly.
So the interesting thing about, when you have this dream of being an artist, a musician, a creative, you have this idea of what you think is going to happen, what your career is going to turn out to be.
Hmm.
What's the difference between that dream of being a musician all the time and the fact that it's happening right now?
Mm, that's a great question. Yeah, I often I journal or I write about this kind of thing all the time because it's yeah, it can be hard to keep track sometimes. Um I think the dream that's in the spirit and the head and the soul, like the dream that sort of fuels the whole thing, um, that can be hard to gauge when it's actually coming true, just in day-to-day life. Because there's also the reality of it all to just make a living being a musician in 2025. And so day to day, sometimes it can be really hard to sort of feel like, man, am I really moving in the right direction? Is this really happening? So that's why I sit down and write a lot and kind of remind myself, reality check and think about, okay, well, where am I actually? And when I sort of look back and reflect on all the things that are happening or have happened, that's where I realize the dream, so to speak, is coming true. And it's unfolding in some ways that I would have never predicted, and then in other ways, exactly as I dreamed of. And so I think it's really important to do that, at least for me, to like remind myself, okay, well, what's actually happening? Because the wear and tear of just being, the hustle of being a full-time musician in today's day and age, and I think always it can be grueling and it can definitely run the risk of like stripping the passion and the joy of playing music, which is a very dangerous thing. I think I never want to be playing music where it feels like I'm on autopilot or where it feels like I'm just clocking into work. Like that's one thing I want to avoid at all costs. But I can see how that's totally possible, if you're just like trying to make ends meet, you teach or you show up to your gigs and just day to day, it can really wear you down. So yeah, I write about it a lot to try to like make sure I'm staying on course, so to speak.
So, you've played on prestigious stages in New York, just hallowed venues that everybody would love and dream to be on. But what was the first stage that you played on where you thought, wow, I can't believe this is happening?
Mm, that's a good one. There's a few different ones, but I guess I would have to say it was when I was still living in Hartford and, still had a lot of stuff to get together, honestly. But the great bassist Desron Douglas, who I should also mention is a Hartford native, um, he invited me to play at Minton's Playhouse in Harlem, a very, well-known venue. That was the first gig I ever, the first concert I ever did in New York City. So I was like so nervous and it was just like this huge deal for me. Like, wow, I'm actually playing a show in New York City. And again, it's like I look back and I'm like, oh man, I had no place playing on that band at that time. But I really appreciate that he's always been someone who's given me a lot of chances and has, I guess, seen something in me. And I should also note that he, many years later, this was in 2024, he invited me to play with him at the Village Vanguard, which is like the mecca of, that's the holiest stage of all jazz stages here in New York and in the world. Um, and so I really owe a lot to him for giving me those chances. And so, anyways, I would say really, actually, he kind of holds two of the most, special performances for me in terms of just like stages that really are memorable for me to have first step foot on. Yeah.
So, what is it that you like the best about being a professional musician? What gets you up every day? What do you look forward to?
Wow. So many different things. I mean, at on one hand, I just to have something that is so humbling and beyond that I can just keep coming back to every day. And rather than, and this is a good thing, but rather than feeling like I'm getting closer to the finish line, it's like the more I come back to it, the further I realize I am and how endless this thing is. Just this like infinite well of inspiration and sort of like life force is so amazing. And I think like the lens that music can provide you to look life through is really a remarkable thing. And I think it translates, it's very similar to any art form. I think to just look at life through the lens of art in general allows for a certain type of sensitivity to things and just an appreciation for damn near everything, just the miracles and everything and how remarkable it all is because that's all what fuels the music. So to have that outlook is something that I really don't ever want to take for granted. And it's a blessing and a curse because it can be frustrating too to be so like I guess hyper attuned to things and being, hypersensitive. But yeah, that's one element that I really appreciate. And then of course, just the nature of the musician lifestyle. Um, to be constantly surrounded by such curious minds, such beautiful people, soulful, whether it's fellow musicians or just people who go out to seek live music, you know, anyone who's like choosing to go to a jazz club, for example, those are, I don't want to over assume or generalize, but more often than not, they are very interesting, curious, soulful people. And so to have the chance to just kind of get to know the world through people like that, and of course, to be able to travel, and it's just such a wonderful way to experience the world and to get to know it. And so I feel very proud and lucky to just be a part of such a wonderful, uplifting community. And again, now more than ever, it's just so important to have that too. We live in a time where things are just so polarized, and it's very disheartening sometimes. So again, now more than ever, like whenever, whether I'm playing background music or on a big stage somewhere, I just feel very lucky to be surrounded by people who are choosing to show up to the world in that way and who really prioritize community and, art and just value the world and, stuff like that. I'm really grateful for.
So at the end of the day, why do you love this art form we call jazz?
Oh man. Well, I would say for a lot of the same reasons as I was just listing off previously. And to just have the chance to express yourself so freely. Again, it's very humbling because I think to me, like the masters of jazz music are really not afraid to put themselves on the edge, and it's really a an amazing interaction with oneself to really go to the depths inside and to take a chance on just expressing yourself to like the most vulnerable, fullest degree. And so if you're willing to like take a chance to do that, jazz at that level to me is so remarkable and teaches you so much. It's like a guru in a way. So I really appreciate it in that way, the form of self-expression that it provides, because I feel like oftentimes I struggle to get a lot of that expression out otherwise in other facets of life. So it's very healing in that way. And then I just love the feeling. There's nothing to me like when if I'm in the audience or on the bandstand, it doesn't matter. That sort of elevating feeling when things are really happening and the music is really synced up, and it's sort of this out of body experience that I think everyone takes part in sometimes in jazz music, especially. That's it's almost undescribable. It's a very spiritual feeling, and I just cherish that so much. It feels so beyond this plane that we live on. So I really love that in jazz music. I think of like there's this, and I know a lot of people know this moment I'm talking about, but to me, the recording of John Coltrane live at Birdland, when he's playing Afro Blue and McCoy takes the solo, building up to Coltrane's solo, and like when Coltrane first enters, that's like, I guess, the closest I would get to trying, like on a recorded example to describe what I'm talking about. But there's like this otherworldly, like euphoric explosion that happens, and it's like that's what I'm talking about. Like that moment is why I love jazz.
Right on. So let me ask you this, Tony. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everyone on the bandstand, that you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, working on it every day, but I am trying to just be, oh man, trying to just cultivate love and support and just, I guess, be as honest and truthful as I can with this music. And again, I'm learning every day, but that's the thing I'm learning as I pursue this music is that it's all about truth. And so as I get more and more into this thing and I'm trying to learn and shed these layers and get to know myself better, that's one thing I'm just coming back to is to try to be as honest and authentic as I can and to just come from a place of love to the best of my ability, to not let my demons, take the wheel, and to just be someone that's fun to be around, because that's what I really appreciate with other people and things. Is like at the end of the day, I really just want to have fun while we can, playing music or just living life. And so I really hope that whether it's people who play music with me or who hire me to play music with them, or just the audience, is that they're having fun, you know, being a part of whatever musical experience that is. That's very important to me.
So if anybody wants to pick up a copy of the album, the new album, they want to catch you live, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
Well, the best place to support me directly or the music directly is to go to my website, which is tonydavismusic.com. Um, we do have physical copies of this record for those that are interested in that type of thing and want like a signed copy. But also on the website, it has my whole tour itinerary and where I'm playing, if they are so interested in that. And there's access to all my other music. That being said, all of this music is available on all the different streaming platforms and YouTube and Spotify, so forth and so on. But yeah, tonydavismusic.com is where everything can be found. My social media, videos, blah, blah, blah. So I would lead them there.
I love it. Tony, so good to meet you, man. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck on the new release, man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Kansas City, New York City, Hartford, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Tony for his time and story. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, but for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.